I must be really good at managing stress because I think I've got it together. Like I am presenting in a very calm way.
Yes.
And again, stress creeps up on us in ways that we don't expect. One thing that we talked about in our last session was the difference between experiencing a stressor, right? So a stressful event,
Right.
and then the perception of that stressor, and then moving that into stress.
Yeah.
And that stress goes somewhere,
Okay.
right?
Great.
And so
Yep.
what we want to do is really identify, number one, sometimes we can be under the belief system that I must be really good at managing stress because I think I've got it together. Like I am presenting in a very calm way.
Yes.
And again, stress creeps up on us in ways that we don't expect, right?
Right.
And so we had talked a little bit about some of the ways that we wanted to recognize burnout showing up. And so we talked about, emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, decreased sense of accomplishment. When we notice that some of these things are starting to creep in, we want to recognize that we are kind of in that trauma response. We're in this fight, flight, freeze mode. We're trying to determine, how do I move forward when I don't feel like I have any value in where I'm at, and I don't feel like I'm making progress, and I'm also really exhausted.
Yeah.
What we want to do to help prevent us from moving into complete burnout, which can creep up really quickly, we can be experiencing some symptoms of burnout and be able to mitigate it before it gets into a place where it's really over our heads.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the ways that we talked about this stress cycle is, the way that God created our bodies is to mitigate stress, not only in a social emotional way, but also very physical way. And as society has, progressed into very different ways in which we interact together and different ways that we experience stressors, it's much more difficult to complete stress cycles. We used to carry buckets of water. We used to hoe the garden, and all these ways that we were really able to complete stress cycles with physical activity. So that kind of moves us into segueing to our first most effective stress cycle completer, which is physical activity.
Yeah.
One of
I
the
had a
ways
feeling you were going to say this.
Yes. One of the ways that we are able to really be effective at really regulating some of our stress is to engage in physical activity for 20 to 60 minutes every day. And I think I have some clients who kind of say, I'm not a physical activity person. And so, good luck. Tell me what else I can do. Physical activity is by far the most effective way that we can complete stress cycles. And so what I like to do is talk to individuals that just say, like, I'm not a runner. I'm not going to get up and spend 20 to 60 minutes like working out. It's not in my wheelhouse. Okay. If you're not there, we can still get some good physical responses by going through what we call a progressive muscle relaxation process. So what we do with progressive muscle relaxation, you can do this right from your bed when you wake up in the morning, is simply tighten up your muscles in varying groups along the way from the top of your head to the bottoms of your toes, or vice versa. But for example, if I was moving with my fists, I would tighten my fists up until they're shaking, they're trembling. I'm really engaging my muscles, and I'm tightening them up really strong. And I'm holding that for 1 minute. And I'm breathing and being very effective at my breath. And I'm taking breaths in my nose, filling up my belly, and I'm exhaling through my nose again. Now, at that 1 minute mark, I'm going to release my muscles, and I'm just going to be present with how my body's feeling as I'm releasing that muscle tension. Now, when we do this, with our shoulder muscles up to the ears and with our hands and forearms all the way down to our body, we do receive a lot of the same chemicals that we would if we were going on a run. So that's one option. And the most effective option is that physical exertion. Another thing to think about is simply breathing, right? So taking time to have some effective breaths, like we said, in through the nose, really pulling that oxygen into our belly, and then exhaling and simply noticing how our breath feels. Often when I'm practicing, I call this tactical breathing. We used this process with US soldiers who are preparing for war. Because when you are in the midst of combat and in the middle of an extreme situation, the best way to move into a process of cognitive tunneling where you can execute the mission is by breathing. So breathing is one great opportunity. Another is positive social interaction. So the thing that I love about church and about a body of believers is the community. Now, in a pastoral role, it's very difficult to have undivided support within your home church community. Right. And this is where I truly believe that it is of immense value to be in community with believers of a different church body. Yeah. Other pastors are really helpful, other associate pastors, but having people that are in your corner, supporting you, available for you, and you do the same for them, the relationship is reciprocal, in two different church bodies so that you can really effectively be available for one another is huge.
I love those examples because it really does take into consideration that we're all in different places, and there's no excuse. You can do something. You can address this in some form or fashion. I think you have some more for us.
Yeah, absolutely, totally. Another thing that I really like to toss in, I've spent some time on the clinical side in relationship work. And one thing that is really helpful at stress cycle completion is what we call the stress reducing conversation. And so coming home and having a conversation with your partner, with your spouse, with an elder, with someone that you trust about the things that are really causing you stress. And that other person simply being there to hold space for you, not to find solutions, not to say whether or not you chose the right thing, but to simply hold space and provide empathy. And then reciprocating on the other side.
Yeah.
There's a huge opportunity.
Right. And I think that is there, and I'm wondering, okay, this is me as asking for my own personal question. Sometimes I think when I am feeling stressed, it's all, it's kind of all up here, I'm thinking about all of this, and then my husband's a great listener. So when he comes home, I'll just be like, this is what's happening. And sometimes I almost feel like more upset just because like I've said it and it's just, now it's out there, like I'm just, I feel like now I've really said it. It's been up here, but now it's out, and wow, I really feel those things. And he's witness to it, all of that is happening. And so I think sometimes it feels like, I don't want to just go through all of that, and I'll probably just feel worse because it's all really, I don't know. Does that make sense? I don't know if anyone out there feels that way.
That's a great question. So, a point of or a question that I would have for you is, how are you received along the way? So what can be really helpful to some is simply to unload your truck. For others, and this is I think you and I are very much the same. I've trained my husband well, and he asks really effective questions like, who are the key players in this problem? Or, if you were to wave a magic wand and this looked the way that you wished it did, what would that look like? So he's able to ask questions to help me process through what I'm thinking and feeling. Yeah. And then I'm able to come to a solution.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's great. Some key questions, and we can't expect that the person that we're telling this to will always know maybe what the right questions are. So some prompting isn't a bad idea.
Yeah.
You just said you trained your husband well, so
Yep.
These would be some great questions to ask me. Yeah. So you're sometimes just unloading everything isn't always going to make you feel better, but a little bit of processing along the way can be helpful. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing that I really enjoy when you're talking about our spouses is affection, is really effective at stress cycle completion. So there's a ton of science underneath the 6-second kiss. 6 seconds is a long time, especially when you've been married for a long time. You think, wow, that's a really long time. But when you process through this 6-second timeline, you have this amazing release of dopamine that takes place at no sooner than the 6-second mark when it comes to a kiss. Another dopamine releaser that's really helpful is a hug, but hugs are a little trickier. This can be great with your kids. It can be great with your spouse. It can be great with a brother or sister. But with hugs, in order to create that connection and kind of achieve that dopamine release, it requires 20 seconds. So a long, steady hug. And it's interesting because if you are leaning on the other person, you don't receive the same positive effects to your physiology. So what you want to do is have two steady people on their own 2 feet, balancing their own bodies, embracing for 20 seconds, and really taking the time to smell the other person, to feel that safety provided with the love that's there, and just allow it to sink in.
Okay, because we all have had those hugs where we felt like someone was taking a hug from us, not giving a hug. Okay, so and we've probably been on the other end too, but that's really, really insightful. Those things that are happening inside of our brain, we probably just didn't even realize. So I love that. After this, I will be checking out that 6-second kiss for sure.
You need to. So last 2 things that I really like to incorporate is when you're looking at other ways, one thing that we always feel better about, I don't know if you've experienced this as well, Angela, is crying. Crying, we don't enjoy crying, and also it is a stress cycle completer, and also we often feel better after we've cried. It's an innate opportunity that God has built into our bodies to be able to almost release and flow out some of that stress that has built up.
Okay, well, I have to tell you that I get migraines, so crying isn't always great for me, but one thing that happens, I know that if I'm in stress, is if I will wake up crying. If I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm crying, then I know that I'm really stressed.
Yeah.
So I never really, took that, made that connection that was, I just feel like, oh, something's bothering me and, I had to get out, but I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm going to have a good cry because I'm just thinking I'm going to be in pain at the end of that. But, my body's like, you're doing it because you're going to, this is happening.
Yeah.
So that's
absolutely.
Yeah.
So the last way, besides, we all know prayer and meditation are really helpful and help center and ground us and remind us that we are okay. He has won the battle. Jesus paid it all. The last thing that's really interesting is creative expression. So at the end of this, really significant craziness that happened in the mental health side of things with 2020, I started noticing symptoms of burnout in myself. And so I recognized that I was client facing often. I saw way more patients than I had really had capability of. I knew I could do it in the short term. It was time to dial things down. So I did 2 things. One was dial down a caseload, set some good boundaries. Number 2, I bought a trailer. I bought a 2007 travel trailer, and my husband and I took the opportunity to make a super bougie, glammy trailer, and we sold it.
Oh,
And it was just a way to connect with my partner, and look at him and say, hey, we're doing these amazing things together and we're able to be creative and develop, and we don't have to say a word to one another.
yeah, yeah. You're doing something creative together, a project together where you feel like you're getting some of those little things going, but you don't have to, like you said, you don't have to get into some deep discussion.
Yeah. Yes. And
Yeah, I
sometimes you
definitely.
just need to be hands in
Uh-huh.
and to develop something that is creative. So it might be playing a song on the piano or dancing to some breakout music in the living room, but something that really gets your creative juices flowing and allows you to simply do something that's separate from your typical line of work.
Right. Oh, I love it. That sounds awesome. Well, next week we're going to be talking about, okay, all bets are off. I'm totally in burnout and this is super hard. So what are we going to do? So if that's where you're at, please don't miss out on next week because we definitely care about you. We want you to know that there is hope even in the middle of burnout. And so we will see you next time. Thanks, Mellisa.
Thank you.
And a big thank you to His Heart for supporting this channel. If you want more information for you and those you love on mental health, go to mentalhealth.academy today.